Back in November of 2020, before Biden's election and before the inevitable scandals that would surround the group, the Lincoln Project founders held a leadership meeting about the future of that organization, which had brought in over $87 million that year. Their plan to build a billion dollar media company focused on combating the, quote, global forces of authoritarianism.
So joining us to discuss that plan and more, author and friend of the show, Ryan Girdusky. Ryan, this was all revealed in a new New York Times expose on the group, all of which got started because of your great reporting. What did we learn about the Lincoln Project in this story?
So back in September, they started a group called TLP Media, which was supposed to be part of their billion-dollar media empire. And really only 4 members of the Lincoln Project, Steve Schmidt, Reed Galen, Rick Wilson, and John Weaver, were kind of taking the money in from all these projects they were doing. They were getting far more than any other people associated with the organization. They were being paid primarily through Reed Galen's LLC, which is bringing in $27 million of that $87 million.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they brought in a substantial amount. Remember, I mean, they talk about George Conway a lot, but George Conway is a very successful lawyer. He makes millions of dollars from his law firm. A lot of them didn't need the money nearly as much as these 4 gentlemen did, and didn't see the opportunity like these 4 gentlemen did. So they created this multimedia empire, and they're still working on it. They still plan on doing it. They launched a new group called Lincoln Project 2024, where they moved millions of dollars. They basically gutted the Lincoln Project of many of its finances, according to the New York Times reporting, moved it into their private businesses for this new Lincoln Project 2024 project and the TLP Media Enterprise.
Wow. So who are the key players that are moving forward with this plan to create the billion-dollar media enterprise?
Basically, all 3 of the 4 major founders, Steve Schmidt, Rick Wilson, and Reed Galen. The only one who was ousted was John Weaver after my story came out. But they also broke that they actually knew about John Weaver. I thought I'd heard as early as June. It's actually as early as January 2020. Wow. And the Lincoln Project members not only, I mean, they kept on saying we had no idea, we weren't really in close contact with him, we didn't really know him. It turns out not only did they know him, but in October they wrote a contract with him to take him into the media empire. So he was not only well known and well affiliated with Rick Wilson and Steve Schmidt and Reed Galen, but they until the story came out, they were fully planning on bringing him on board into 2021 and 2022 in the billion-dollar media project.
Let's just refresh everybody's memory in case they're just joining us now. John Weaver was the co-founder of that Lincoln Project, worked with John Kasich as well, longtime Republican operative who you revealed, who had sexually harassed young boys, in some cases, and many young men online, sending them sexually explicit messages, offering things. And you're saying that they knew about that January of 2020, not only did nothing, brought him into the business, and only after you contacted them did the wheel begin to start turning, and they didn't even acknowledge it until very recently, did they?
Well, what happened was he reached out to over 150 young men, at least 2 were minors, John Weaver did, offering them jobs for sex. That was what the allegation was. They had heard about it as early as January. They did an internal review in June. They heard my story was being worked on in July. John Weaver had his alleged heart attack in August. They said that he was out of the organization. He was very much still in the organization. He had a meeting with them about turning Texas blue and trying to fight for Texas, bringing him into the media organization in October. Still very much involved. When my story came out on January the 11th, they ignored it. Then Axios created a puff piece basically giving cover to the Lincoln Project, saying that he was just gay and every conversation was consensual. It wasn't until the New York Times story came out at the end of January that they at least acknowledged that he was a predator because it had to do with a 14-year-old boy. And then they said they didn't know anything of it. That is demonstrably false. They also said that they weren't really close with him. That's also demonstrably false. They were very close to him, and they knew about it, and they knew about it several times. According to the New York Times story, which kind of links everything together, and I've heard all this privately, messages were going out in January, in March, in June, and in September from young men to members of the organization. At least 5 members of the organization that I knew about were getting firsthand contacts from the young men saying, you need to do something about this. And they heard about it 5 times within 1 year, and they did nothing about it.
Wow.
That is wild. Yeah.
And yet, Ryan, I mean, what do you make of their chances of making their big media thing a success? Because I still see some of these guys doing cable news appearances. Yes, there is actual real reporting, some measure of accountability happening right now, but I could certainly imagine them being rehabilitated here.
Well, some of them did end up getting their contracts pulled from them, like Rick Wilson and Steve Schmidt from MSNBC. But yeah, listen, as long as there's still resistor wine moms willing to do anything to stop Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and whatever other monster they can create, there will be people willing to donate. They had 500,000 private donors in 2020 and 2019. That's a lot of people that have to be convinced. Now, listen, if they lose their major donors who give $1 million, $500,000, or $100,000, that's a major hit. But they still got $30 million in donations for under $200 per donor. And those people have to be informed. Look, I mean, if you care about the left, give straight to a candidate or a policy or a think tank or whatever. But giving it to these organizations, they're just taking your money and they're using it blindly. So yeah, I mean, they can rehabilitate. I mean, it's America; anyone can rehabilitate their image and get a second chance. I mean, there have been far worse stories than this one that have.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you joining us, breaking down the story, Ryan. Thank you, man.
Thanks, Ryan.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, he wants the National Guard to flank the Capitol building for 2 more months as Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton fights to block permanent fencing around the Capitol. We'll discuss when Rising continues.